Programme. It's 4 minutes past 7 on LBC. Now, tonight, in the first hour of the programme, we're going to conduct our fourth and fifth Conservative leadership interviews with Tom Tugendhat and Kemi Badenoch. We haven't had replies from Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss, so we may get them next week, but I suspect not. Coming up a little bit later, we're going to be talking more about Liz Truss. We talked a lot about Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt this week, but at 8 o'clock, we're going to get your reaction to the two interviews that I'm about to do, and also talk a little bit about Liz Truss's campaign as well. And we'll be talking to the Ukrainian MP, Alexei Goncharenko. Now, you can phone in with your questions to Tom Tugendhat and Kemi Badenoch, 0345 6060 973, and you can text your question to 84850. And if you would like to watch us, you can do so on Global Player. Tom Tugendhat, welcome.
Ian, it's really good to see you. Thank you.
Now, we've known each other some time. I chaired your selection meeting.
You did, yes.
Back in the day. What was it, 2014?
2013. I literally just left the army. My wife was pregnant with our first child. It was the first seat I applied for, and you were in the chair, and it was an extraordinary day. And
despite my efforts, you got selected.
despite exactly. No.
Now, today's result, you went down by 5 votes. Were you expecting that?
Look, I thought it was possible that things could move around a lot. This is, as you know very well, this is what's called the most sophisticated electorate in the world.
I thought it was duplicitous.
Well, you can use whichever word you choose, but it's certainly it's an electorate that is looking for many things out of candidates and is looking for different things at different points. Very often, people are looking to stop somebody or to support somebody. So it's shifting sands, Ian. It's shifting sands.
But the fact that Jeremy Hunt dropped out and he had 18 votes going spare and you went down, I mean, that must have been disappointing.
Well, I think those votes went in various different places because I know that some of them came to me, so others went from me. So, and that's just the nature of this. I suspect that's true of pretty much everybody in the campaign, that actually you gained a bit and you lost a bit, and some people gained a bit more and lost a bit more.
But you met the threshold. You got 32 votes. You needed 30 to go through to the next round. But what's the point? Because you're clearly not going to win now, are you?
See, I don't accept that. First of all, we're going into the leadership round, which is going to be on debates, which is, one of those areas where we're going to be seeing how, the people who actually count, the people of the United Kingdom, see the way that we articulate conservative ideas and defend positions. Because that's what this is really about. This isn't actually just about a choice between MPs. It's fundamentally a choice of who's going to lead this country, who's going to be able to carry the message that matters so much to all of us, to champion ideas for the party and the country going forward.
So you're continuing, really, to take part in the TV debates?
Well, I'm continuing in order to champion ideas, which everybody's doing. That's literally the point of being in politics, is to champion ideas. And, for me, that's about getting a clean start, because, as you know, we've had a very difficult few years, and we've had a whole series of issues that have come up and distracted, to put it politely, several aspects of government. So I'm in this to make sure that we have a clean start, a new broom, as it were, into government, and we reset the relationship of trust between the government and the country.
You've actually disappointed me, because it's taken you 3 minutes to mention the phrase "clean start."
Well,
so I'm relieved in a way, but
I'm here to help here.
In terms of the competition, because that's what it is. You've all been quite careful not to slag off the other candidates. Now, in any competition, there's always a degree of black arts that goes on. Everybody suspects Gavin Williamson of sort of lending votes from the Rishi Sunak campaign to other campaigns for all sorts of different reasons. I don't think that really happens to the extent that others seem to. But have you been sort of... Do you think it's a positive thing that the way this campaign has been conducted so far, or do you think there have been too many dirty tricks, maybe behind the scenes?
So I have to say the briefing against Nadhim Zahawi that I saw the other day was really disappointing. He's a good man, and he's somebody who's demonstrated integrity and courage. He came here as a child and really built a business in an extraordinary way. And I think that, he's somebody who should be celebrated in our society for the efforts that he's made. And to see him maligned, I thought was very, very cruel. But I have to say, you talk about being polite to the other candidates. There is a reason for that, Kemi is actually a really good friend. And I know she's going to be on next. And I hope, I'm sure you're going to give her a tough time as an interviewer, but I'm sure you're going to hear her champion ideas and values that matter to all of us. And she's a fantastic spokesperson for our party. She's an extraordinary advocate for our cause. And Penny and I have been friends for many, many years. She's a fantastic individual. I know she's a friend of yours as well. I mean, she's a really good person. Rishi and I met in 2014. We've known each other for a very long time, and Liz and I have been working together. I mean, other sides of the table, but working together now for nearly a year.
Has she been a good Foreign Secretary?
She hasn't been in office that long for me to judge it. I want to be fair to her.
Nearly a year.
Well, yeah, but you inherit a lot from your predecessor, and it takes a while for those things to roll through before you can really tell what effect the incumbent has had. So I don't want to be unfair, and as ever, my job as the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee is to criticise and to try and improve the way that the Foreign Office runs. So, I mean, I can be critical, but the reality is that she's been in office for about a year, and it'd be unfair to be too harsh. I mean, there's areas on Libyan migration and things like that where I've highlighted issues. But
what do you make of the criticism that Lord Frost meted out this morning to Penny Mordaunt? She was his deputy, and he basically said she is not fit to become Prime Minister.
Well, look, I simply can't comment on the grounds that I have no idea what their working relationship was like. It is something about this process, though, Ian, and I know you'll have got it as well, because anybody in public life at all has people who share their views of them, and I'm afraid that's not only legitimate, it's part of the reality of life, and I've had a lot of friends writing about me in different ways, sometimes extremely complimentary and very flatteringly, and sometimes a little bit less so. And that's just the nature of it. But I think it is important when we're looking at the greatest office of state, I mean, to one that you can be elected to anyway, it is important that we know everything about candidates, and I suppose it is legitimate that people express their opinions, but I think we should always put it in context.
Now, you've highlighted a number of policies, and there's been a lot of criticism throughout this campaign, even though it's only, 4 or 5 days old, really, that people have concentrated far too much on tax, not enough on the cost of living. But you've actually talked about some meaty policies today, haven't you, on police, for example? I've
been talking about fraud, because there's certainly a very large proportion of crime in the UK is actually no longer the kind of crime that we think of that police intervene on, but actually it's fraud, and a lot of it's online fraud. And cybercrime today costs us a fortune. Last year it's estimated to have cost £2 billion. Now that's literally thousands and thousands of people whose life savings, whose hopes for a better future, whose hopes for a quiet retirement, or for a holiday, or whatever it may have been, or maybe for putting their kids through college, it's gone. It's stolen. And we don't yet have the structures that are able to deal with it. Now, this is no criticism of the police. The police are not structured in that way. Kent Police do a fantastic job in many ways of doing work on this. But the reality is they're geographically based, and this is a not only national but international problem. So I'm talking about putting the National Crime Agency on a war footing and resourcing it so that it's able to actually take on these crimes and really deal with it. And it's not just about homes. It's not just about families, although those are very, very serious effects on our community. It's also about our security, because there are some countries, I'm afraid, that are using theft, that nature, fraud, cybercrime, in order to buy weapons or support terrorist actions abroad. And we need to be absolutely clear that is not acceptable.
Cost of living crisis. Now, Rishi Sunak has come under criticism, saying, well, as a millionaire, or multimillionaire, how can he possibly understand what it's like to live with very little money? Has there ever been a time in your life when you've been up the creek financially and really wondered where the next penny was coming from?
I've certainly had, when I was starting out after university and all the rest of it, I was starting out in places like Lebanon or in London. There were plenty of times when I was wondering whether the next paycheck would quite meet the rent. I managed to get through it, and sometimes had to ask friends and family for a bit of a help. But it wasn't always easy. And but the greatest strength I've had in life has been loving family and a strong support network like that. And I think for many of us, the greatest insurance, if you like, is not social insurance or the welfare state. It's our friends and family who stand by us.
How do you relate to people who don't have that support network, who don't have any family that can come to their aid, who don't have any friends that have money and are literally living day to day, wondering if they're going to be able to afford a meal tomorrow?
Well, that's exactly what we've got to address as Conservatives and as communities. we've got to get together and make sure that we build up that level of support and that level of interaction. And there's many ways of doing it. You know, for some people it's through a church, for other people it's through a community group, a scout group or something like that. For other people it's through a sports team. It can be through many different ways that people get together and support each other and are able to make sure that they have that network. Now, it is hard, and the state has an important role, and that's why I've spoken today about making sure that the universal credit rate is eased, so that we don't tax people as highly as they do better, and they're trying to do better with their salaries and ease themselves out of welfare. And I've spoken as well about the need for us to work together as a society. Now, this weekend is actually, for a different reason, I think it's really important that people do it, because as you know, there's going to be record temperatures, and keeping an eye on our friends and neighbours is going to be really important. Very sadly, it's likely that, sadly, many people will die over the weekend because of the higher temperatures, and so making sure that our friends and neighbours are kept cool and visiting, and particularly elderly communities, is going to be really important.
Are you committed to net zero?
Yes, I am. But one of the things I'd like to be very clear about is nobody has yet set out a plan or a costing for getting there by 2050. So while I think that we do have to get to net zero, I really do think we have to do it in a way that people can afford. And one of the things that concerns me is that we tax people in the United Kingdom for things that we then import from other countries who aren't committed in the same way.
Rwanda. Well, you have billed yourself effectively as the change candidate, the new broom, the clean start. How, therefore, can you support the policy on deporting people to Rwanda?
Well, first of all, it's a very small element of a migration policy. It must be...
it's a wicked element, isn't it?
Well, I don't think it is, actually. I think guarding our borders is a fundamental national security priority, and making sure that people aren't able to profit from human trafficking and slavery, which is effectively what it is a humanitarian cause. I really do think it is evil to allow people to be trafficked. And, you know, one of the things that I worked on years ago was... various different military operations in parts of North Africa and the Sahara. And one of the things that was perfectly clear to me then, and is even more clear now, is the cost of human trafficking through the Sahara. The tragedy, the human tragedy, is absolutely appalling.
But how is anyone who's on the northern coast of France, who's intending to come to this country, how on earth are they deterred by the prospect of a couple of hundred people a year being sent to Rwanda? Because the odds are that they wouldn't be one of them, so they will still come.
On its own, it won't be enough. And Priti has been very open about this, and I have to say I respect her for this. She's been very open about this, that it is totemic, it's indicative of the commitment of the government. But alone, it's not the most important. The reality is what we've got to do is we've got to work with the new Libyan government and make sure we close down that Libyan route. As you know, that's where a lot of people are coming across the Mediterranean. And the reality is we're seeing many people very sadly die in the Mediterranean, and we need to be absolutely clear that we will protect life at sea. Safety of life at sea is a commitment of all mariners, of the Royal Navy and many others as well, of every other mariner as well. And we need to do that. We need to do it in the Channel, of course, but we also need to do it in the Mediterranean. And by closing down those routes, we will stop people feeling that there's an incentive to pay the traffickers who then exploit people. Because one of the things that the traffickers do is use people quite literally as slaves. It's absolutely horrific. It is a vile trade, and it must end. But
why not, as the French have suggested, why not open a reception centre near Calais where people can be processed legally? The argument I know against it is, well, it could act as a sort of attraction to more people to come. But that would be a humane way of dealing with people, rather than threatening them with going to a country which has its own human rights problems.
Well, look, I think our entire migration policy needs to be looked at in the round. And as I say, I've set out the work in Libya that I started doing when I was just recently, actually yesterday. Forgive me, the days roll into one at the moment a little bit. But yesterday I was in the Foreign Affairs Committee talking to the Libyan. To the person who's been elected as Libyan Prime Minister. The reason I'm slightly cautious about that title is because there's somebody else who's got a lot of guns who's claiming to be Libyan Prime Minister. But the person who's actually...
Maybe that's how we should do it. To have an arms race between the candidates.
I know colonels do coups, but I think I don't think I'll be asking my friends to join in this one, if you don't mind.
I suspect I'm not going to get an answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. If you come bottom on Monday, which given today's results you possibly could, and you are eliminated, have you decided who you would support? I'm not expecting you to tell me because
I haven't decided, and I haven't decided because the debates are going to demonstrate, I hope, that this is a competition not just to win the leadership of the Conservative Party for the next 2 years, but to win the general election in 2024. And what we need to do is we need to find somebody who can communicate not just to Tory party members, which is of course incredibly important, but actually to the country wide. What we want to do is we want to make converts. We don't just want to be speaking to ourselves.
And if you bow out next week, and would you agree to serve in the cabinet of all of the other candidates, whoever wants?
It's an absolute privilege to serve in government, and were I ever asked to do so, I would be privileged to do so.
Would it have to be in cabinet?
I just said I would be privileged to serve in government.
Well, that's my lot. We're going to come to your calls in a moment. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to ask Tom Tugendhat a question. It's 19 minutes past 7.
This is LBC. Is LBC with Ian Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
22 minutes past 7. Kemi Badenoch will be joining us in about 10 minutes' time for an interview and to take your calls. We have Tom Tugendhat here for this half hour, and we're going to your calls now. Adam's in Leicester. Hello, Adam.
Hello, Ian.
Hi, what would you like to ask Tom?
Yes, mine is about the Union. There's a clear push from Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland for a second referendum, and there's talk of a border poll in Northern Ireland. What would be the government's strategy if there were these polls? What positive arguments would Tom make for the Union, rather than how awful it would be for the countries to break away? Or would the government have to rely on Gordon Brown to come to the rescue again?
Shall I take it?
Yeah.
I'm delighted, Adam. Thank you very much. Look, first of all, there is no need for another referendum for the simple reason that we've just had one, and the answer was given. And the answer is absolutely clear, which is that every once in a generation, as every participant agreed, and that means not for another, not for many years yet. And so I don't think there's any need for one. But I'll tell you what the benefits of the Union are.
But the Scottish people have voted for one. I mean, they voted in the SNP and the Greens, so they've got a majority in the Scottish Parliament that are in favour of a referendum. That is a mandate.
No, it's not a mandate. The reality is what that is a mandate for the SNP and the Scottish Green Party to fix the failing education system and the failing health system in Scotland. That's a mandate for.
But it was part of the manifesto. And that's what the people of Scotland were voting on. And surely they are entitled to regard it as arrogant for the Westminster government to deny them something that they feel they have a mandate for.
And yet the polls are absolutely clear. They are consistently around 40-45% for separation. They don't go.
That's not quite true. I mean, they have been over 50%, but it is more or less 50-50 now. Whereas before 2014,
it's about 45. I mean, it's still below.
Well, we're looking at different polls then. But in 2014, the independent side of the debate, went into the whole referendum with about 28%, and that went up to 45%. So, I mean, there has been a significant shift since then.
Look, I accept that there are different views on this, but I don't accept that there is a mandate for a second referendum. The agreement, and Nicola Sturgeon made it, and Alex Salmond made it, and various others made it, was that in 2014 it was a once-in-a-generation referendum. So I just don't accept that there is a mandate for another one. I do, however, think that there are huge benefits to the union. And they're not just financial, they're not just about the strength that we have as a single trading entity or whatever. They're emotional. The fact is that, we are at home across all of these islands. We serve together, I'll tell you, I mean, the first of my friends who I buried on the way back from Afghanistan was in Scotland. And, the idea that I buried him in a foreign field is complete rubbish. I didn't. I buried him at home.
But do you accept, though, that Adam has got a point when he says, well, how are you going to explain the benefits of the union? No, because it is true that most Westminster politicians, whether they're Conservative or Labour, concentrate on Project Fear.
You're absolutely right, Ian. Many do. And Gordon Brown, I don't think, is the salvation for many things, but certainly not for the union. I think what we really need to be doing is getting out there and making that argument. That's why I was speaking to media in Scotland this Sunday. That's why I do Good Morning Scotland. Forgive me, am I allowed to talk about other radio shows?
Feel free.
That's why I go on other radio shows in Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales all the time, because I think having Conservative voices from across the United Kingdom speaking is important, because it's not actually the job of the MSPs and the Conservative Party in Scotland to defend the union. It's the job of the Conservative Party in Scotland to hold Nicola Sturgeon to account for the failures that she's doing in governing Scotland. It's for the whole of the UK to defend the union, because it's about all of us.
Adam, thank you. Let's move on to Dan in Southampton. Hello, Dan.
Good evening. Thank you for taking my call. I will also be wanting to ask this question to Kemi Badenoch later. At the present time, two of the people in this leadership race, Liz Truss and Penny Mordaunt, they were MPs in 2013 and they voted in favour of same-sex marriage. Tom, Kemi and Rishi were elected in 2015 and 17 after that vote was taken. So we might say that you're a little untested when it comes to LGBT issues. What words of support can you give to LGBT voters and Conservatives as to why you should be able to earn their votes?
Well, look, I have a witness for what I'm about to say, because in the hustings that Ian chaired for the Conservative Party in Tunbridge Morning in 2013, he asked all the candidates whether they would have voted in favour of equal marriage.
Did I?
You did.
I don't remember that, but I trust you on that.
You did, actually. And there was a feeling amongst several people in the audience that they would be able to choose the person who objected, because you remember the vote had just got through and it was quite controversial at the time. And I'm very glad to say I had no idea what the others had said, but I said I would have voted for it. And I tell you why I said that. Because I remember in the army when people were concerned that equal rights in the army would have had an effect. And I have to say, it did have an effect on the army. It was entirely positive. It improved the fighting capability of the army. It improved the strength of the army, because diversity is a strength. It allows you to have a different perspective on things and to make sure that you're getting advice in the best way possible from a number of different sources. So I was entirely supportive. And even then, when I was applying for my first, if you like, political job, and it was quite clear that the audience may have not been entirely in favour of equal marriage, I made the case and you were there.
Well, I vaguely remember it now, but I must admit I had forgotten the detail of that. Dan, are you reassured?
Yes, I do appreciate you answering that question in that way, and I look forward to hearing what Kemi Badenoch and Rishi Sunak's answer might be as well.
OK, thank you very much, Dan. Andy is in Hull. Andy, what would you like to ask?
I'd like to ask Tom, and I'm going to put him on the spot here, what he will do to help with sort out all the corruption in his party, especially when we've got all the examples of, ministers with non-doms or, getting tree houses or parties or all the other things like that. What's he going to do to make sure they actually do follow the rules and the guardrails are actually there, because they seem to think they don't apply to them anymore?
So, look, bringing trust back to politics is exactly why I keep using the phrase a clean start, because despite the fact that Ian may have heard it too many times, it does actually mean something to me. It's a mission statement, because actually restoring trust in government, cleaning up government, as you put it, is incredibly important. We're going to go through some really difficult times in coming months and years. We know that inflation is high. We know that energy prices are high. We know that people are feeling it really hard, and that families and homes across our country are wondering what Christmas is going to feel like at the moment and are really worried about the future. And that's why we need people who can trust. We need people who can trust their government, who can trust their community, who can trust the whole of our society to work for them. And that's what I'm talking about. That's why we need to restore trust in our government and our community.
But this contest is taking place because of some of the issues that Andy highlighted there. And yet there's been scant discussion of it, has there really?
Well,
I mean, for example, Chris Pincher has been had the Tory whip suspended. If you were Prime Minister, would you ever consider allowing him back to have the Tory whip?
Well, you're innocent until you're proven guilty, but if what is alleged is proved, then no.
Well, that's a straight answer, which I didn't get to the last candidate I put that to. Andy, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to one last question from Peter in Oxford. Hello, Peter.
Hello. Hi, Tom. You're a breath of fresh air. I wish you luck.
Thank you.
One of the things that I welcome about you is the ability to walk away from some of the more mischievous acts of the previous regime, one of which I think is the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, and another is the intention to water down the European Convention on Human Rights as it applies in the UK. And I very much hope, being somebody who respects law and order, that you will be able to take a stand on those issues and to be able to commit to obeying international law on both points. That's my question.
So look, let me talk about the ECHR, because I think it's a really important debate at the moment. It is the application of British law on others. It is not the application of foreign law on Britain. We wrote that. We wrote the convention. It was written by David Maxwell Fyfe, a Conservative MP in Scotland who was Attorney General, who's an extraordinary guy, a really phenomenal individual. And he wrote it to bring law and rights to what was then an incredibly broken Europe at the end of the Second World War. And so we are about the only country in the world. In fact, we are the only country in the world where if we left it, it would make very, very little difference. What we need to do, though, is we need to make sure that the judges are applying the convention as it was written, not as some of them are interpreting it. But actually, to be honest, we've got a lot of friends across the continent who would support us in that, because although we have an incident with it once every few years, many of them have an incident with it several times a month.
So you are against the government policy of effectively looking at withdrawing from it?
I would not withdraw from the ECHR, and let me be quite clear why. It would pick apart the devolution settlement, and it underpins the Good Friday Accord, and actually for security reasons, it also underpins our intelligence sharing agreement with the United States and others.
Final quick-fire questions. Yes or no answers, please. Would you scrap the online harms bill?
I need to review it.
Scrap the BBC licence fee?
No.
Scrap Channel 4 privatisation?
I don't think it's a good idea. There are many other priorities.
Restore DFID as a separate department? Your worst mistake?
Oh, God, there's so many. It's impossible.
Come on, pick one of them.
I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, I think...
this is your weakest answer so far, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I know, but I'm trying. Probably my worst mistake is now going to be agreeing to do an LBC show for 3 hours in about a week's time, because I'm going to be exposed completely on these sort of things.
Well, that's exclusive for us. Good luck with that. So you can learn from everything that we've done in the.
Well, I'm learning. I'm actually only here for work experience. You know that, don't you?
Say something nice about Keir Starmer.
He's a really decent guy. I've known him since we were elected on the same day. He's completely wrong, and I'm afraid he's not a leader, but he's a decent bloke.
Your karaoke song of choice.
Oh, I'm on fire, Bruce Springsteen.
And your sporting hero.
Very boringly, Mike Gatting. He's a.
Mike Gatting.
I know.
Said no one ever as a sporting hero.
Said no one ever, but he was.
That's
he
an
was
interesting one.
He was Middlesex in England when I was a boy, and so I'm afraid that's
That's an interesting answer. You've either gained or lost a lot of those.
Probably lost.
Tom, thank you so much. Good luck with the Trial LBC show next week.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I should be listening. In a moment, we will be welcoming Kemi Badenoch into the studio for an interview and also to answer your questions. The lines are open 0345 6060 973. It's 7:33.
5 candidates are through to the next round of the Tory leadership contest. Suella Braverman has been knocked out after receiving the fewest votes, while Rishi Sunak is in the lead again with 101. Train drivers at 8 rail companies will walk out for 24 hours at the end of this month in pay disputes. Members of the ASLEF union on operators such as Chiltern